What's up, Mech fans, and welcome back to the channel. So today we have another episode of Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuuX to talk about. This is the second week, so that means we have the second episode, which is titled The White Gundam. Before I dive into my spoiler review and breakdown of the episode, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, head on down to the comments section below and let me know your thoughts on this episode. Feel free to talk spoilers because, as I said, this is a spoiler review and breakdown. Without further ado, let's talk about what went down in this episode. Universal Century 0079. During the 1-year war, Shah Raznable manages to seize two of the Federation's top secret assets on Side 7, the Gundam Mobile Suit and the warship White Base, renamed the Red Gundam and the Sodon by the Principality of Zeon. Shah later customizes the Red Gundam for his own use, outfitting it with an experimental Alpha Psychomu control system which allows those with heightened senses to pilot a mobile suit more effectively. Learning of the existence of new types from Dr. Flanagan, Shah recruits then Lieutenant Shalia Bull as his wingman, and the two prove to be a near unstoppable force against the Earth Federation's army. Though the Federation eventually pushes Zeon forces back into space, Zeon retains the upper hand by capturing the critical Luna 2 asteroid base. In a desperate countermeasure, the Federation sends their own Solomon asteroid base hurtling towards Zeon's stronghold, the Von Braun Lunar City. Shah's team is sent to destroy Solomon, but in doing so, a phenomenon of light dubbed Zek Nova is triggered by the Alpha Psychomu system, obliterating Solomon with Shah and the Red Gundam nowhere to be found. That is, until the year 0085, where Shalia rediscovers the mobile suit piloted by another. Shah's whereabouts are still unknown. Alright, so that should give an overview of how this episode played out. And again, like with episode 1, I had already seen all of this footage from the beginning theatrical release, but there's a lot of differences here as compared to there was in episode 1. And by differences, I mean there's a hell of a lot left out of this episode that was featured in the theatrical release. Before I go over all the stuff that wasn't there though, let's actually talk about the stuff that was here. And right off the bat, this is a true love letter to the original Gundam, particularly original Gundam fans. Now, I've seen a lot of people recently saying that Sunrise and Bandai and the Gundam franchise in general is trying to almost push out the old fans in favor of bringing in a more modern audience. And that really couldn't be further from the truth when you look at this episode that outright just pays tribute to all elements of the original Gundam series. Obviously, the art style on that is a little bit different because this is a new series. The mobile suit design is, of course, a little bit different as well. But you look at everything from the music, the shot composition, the general tone of it, a lot of the dialogue as well, feels like it's ripped straight out of that original Gundam series, particularly with the music. Like, that's really what kind of elevates this into feeling like a 1970s anime series, which is what Mobile Suit Gundam is. And as a fan of that original series, of course, I did only watch it really this year, but I did watch the movie trilogy a few years back. It was great to see. Like, it's truly a fantastic experience, especially when I saw it on the big screen. But, you know, seeing it again, it's awesome, and seeing it in a TV format feels more true to the original Gundam series. And, you know, you get all that music in there that just plays out so nicely. And also the title card drop, which, again, uses that same like little beat music, whatever it was, and then of course the eye catchers as well, which essentially recreate the eye catchers from the original Gundam series, but instead of it saying Mobile Suit Gundam, it says GQuuuuuuX, and then you have this new White Gundam rather than the RX-78-2. And I think generally, even for those that haven't seen the original series, it brings you up to speed at least enough. Now, I did a short like a couple of weeks back after I watched beginning, like basically asking the question of, is GQuuuuuuX a good place for newcomers to the franchise? And I simply said that it's not, mainly because of all this stuff. But with that said, they had 23 minutes or so to essentially encapsulate the 1-year war and kind of give you a backstory on that. Whereas the original Gundam series has, what, like 42 episodes or something like that. Vastly different in terms of how much time they have to flesh things out. And I think within a 23-minute window, they really did the best that they could do. Like, you couldn't really ask for them to condense the 1-year war and a lot of those details any better than what they did. And of course, they kind of stuck to the stuff that was really important and will inform this series going forward. Because, like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you could talk about all these individual battles, but ultimately, what's going to serve this story is the stuff with Shah stealing the Red Gundam. It's the stuff about the Psychomu systems. It's about new types, all that kind of stuff. That is what's more important to this story, rather than saying like, oh, let's throw this character in here. Let's throw this individual battle in here. Like, no, a lot of that stuff is a lot less important than ultimately the stuff that will inform the story of GQuuuuuuuX. There's also a certain like self-referential awareness that this episode has in regards to things that do go down. Of course, talking about, first off, Shah literally mentions this little idea that he has could have changed the outcome of the war, and that little idea was, of course, seeing the Gundam, then going and taking it, which ultimately it did change the outcome of the war. So you have like kind of in-universe moments that do kind of pay reference to things like that. And also one of my favorite like little lines from this episode as well is when Shah goes up against the gun cannon, and of course, like, it's a pretty short battle. And then ultimately afterwards, he says the first mobile suit combat in history was pretty underwhelming. Which, let's face it, like, it kind of is. Like, in the original series, he just goes up against a Zaku and stabs it. Like, it's not the most, like, extravagant of fights ever. And I guess in some ways that can maybe, I don't want to say poke fun, but almost like show a bit of awareness of the limitations of animation at the time with the original series. So there's just little things like that that aren't like making fun of the original series. It kind of pays reference and tribute to all these things that we're thinking. Like, if you think about an in-universe type thing as a very first moment, like a revolutionary, history-changing moment, it's not the most exciting battle ever. It's the right kind of piece of dialogue to put in there that doesn't feel too forced or like it's trying to detract from the original series in any way. I also want to give like a huge shout out to everyone involved with creating this version of Shah, because we kind of look past a lot of these elements where it's bringing a character back in this like specific scenario from, 45 years ago at this point, and to be able to write a character in the same way, represent him the same way on screen, and then of course with a new voice actor truly capture the spirit of that character. Like, it's a thing that shouldn't go unnoticed, but a lot of the time we kind of take it for granted because it is right. Like, if it was wrong, we would of course be up in arms about it, but because it's right, you kind of just take it in its stride. But I just kind of want to give like a shout out to that, how well they did Shah here and made him truly feel like the original version, particularly the voice acting. I think, like, I can't remember off the top of my head who the voice actor is that's doing Shah here. I think he played Takamichi in the Tokyo Revengers anime, but he does a fantastic job. And I think I talked about it in my beginning review, where I think he's probably a better representation of Shah at this time. Because you've got to remember that during the 1 Year War, Shah's like, I want to say he's 19 years old, but he might be in his early 20s. And if you listen to that character, he sounds older because the voice actor just generally has an older sound to him. But the voice actor that they got here to do Shah manages to capture almost that like deadpan monotone delivery, but he just sounds younger and he sounds more youthful. And it just sounds like what Shah should probably sound like at a pretty young age. Like, I'm not going to say he's better than, the voice actor for Shah who's played most of the Shah clones as well, because that is like definitive voice, definitive version of the character. But if we're thinking realistically about the age of Shah at this time, it makes sense that his voice would sound a little bit younger. And that's why I think it's almost a better representation of a young Shah. In fact, I think that this voice actor would be perfect for doing like the origin, for example. Now though, let's move back to those major parts that are clearly missing from this episode. And I understand why. It's 23 minutes, it's really not a long amount of time. But if we look at the beginning theatrical release, there's a hell of a lot there that was featured within this 1 Year War segment of it, and maybe they're saving it for later down the line. I got to assume they are, because it's very important stuff, at least in terms of setting up the plot. Yeah, essentially what you have at the end of this episode is, rather than showing the final battle of this version of the 1 Year War, you have a little bit of a voiceover recap. I think it was from Shalia Bull, kind of then leading us into present day, and all that stuff we heard about in voiceover we actually see play out in the beginning theatrical release. So I've noted down like basically like 2-3 of the major things that are left out. First off, there's no mention of Mavs, which of course we did get mentioned in the first episode of the series, and that's really kind of an important part that's going to play into the world building of GQuuuuuuX. And of course it does start with Shalia and Shah. Essentially, in universe, the tactic of Mavs is kind of like a wingman type thing. It's to do with all the Minovsky particles and all this kind of stuff. And when people get the first hit, they have the advantage. But when you utilize the Mav tactic, it changes things up. It's very important, especially going into the next episode, or what I assume is going to be featured in the next episode, where we get the clan battle. Like, it's important to have knowledge or to have established properly the idea of Mavs and how all that stuff works. So that clearly needs to be here somewhere, and maybe they'll throw it into next episode. We'll get like a kind of brief flashback thing where we see a little bit of an action sequence involving both Shalia and Char, which also brings in the Kikaroga mobile armor, which we do not see in this episode but was featured in beginning, which is Shalia Ball's mobile armor that he pilots and of course works alongside Char when he's in the Red Gundam. So that was left out. But then moving on to the final battle, like that entire final battle is completely left out, and there's a hell of a lot of stuff that goes down there. First off, we don't get to see Char's encounter with what's dubbed as the Kira Kira light, which was the Zeknova incident, and the Kira Kira light is what we saw within the first episode where Amate is in that stream of light. Char has an encounter with that. That leads to the Zeknova incident, which is essentially like a axis shock type of thing that we had in Char's counterattack. And that's completely left out of this episode, which, like I said, was in the beginning theatrical release. Another thing is that there is zero mention of the Rose of Sharon or the escapee from the Flanagan Institute. Again, this is another thing that was featured in that beginning theatrical release. First off, the Rose of Sharon, we don't know what it is, but we know that it's probably going to play into the plot, because you don't throw a name like that around and act like it's of some significance to then never revisit it or use it ever again. It is, of course, going to be a major plot point, I would suspect, so we'll probably see that come in later down the line. And then the escapee from the Flanagan Institute, which from my perspective is either Shuji or Amate, and presumably that will also be an important part of one of the characters that we're going to have in this series. And then last but certainly not least, Sailor doesn't show up at all in the white light type gun cannon, which again, another thing that we see an encounter in the beginning theatrical release between Char and Sailor. Sailor essentially in like a light type gun cannon that is in those same custom colors of the RX-78-2. So essentially she is playing, like filling in for that Amuro role of being kind of the headliner of the Earth Federation forces. And we don't see that in this episode. And of course, that's like important. She also escapes there, so maybe she'll show back up and then we'll get a kind of flashback of setting that up. I don't exactly know, but it feels weird to leave those things out. And it seems like we're kind of done with this flashback, at least in terms of how it's going to play into an entire episode. So we'll probably get bits and pieces here and there in the future of the series, and we'll kind of call back to a lot of that stuff and see some of it play out. But there is no way that they're just like forgetting about this stuff. Like I said, all these elements are super important, especially with that final battle. You cannot simply gloss over it. You need to expand on it and see these things play out. And like I said, we'll probably get it, but it's just a case of when. And it feels weird not to have it now when, I mean, we've already seen it in the beginning theatrical release. But anyways, there we have it. Those are my thoughts and my breakdown of episode 2 of Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuX. Before I get out of here, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. And also stay tuned, because I am covering this series on a weekly basis, doing these full spoiler reviews and breakdowns, and as and when I do watch the episodes, I do shorts doing a quick review of my quick thoughts on the episode. So make sure you stay tuned for those pretty much right after the episode drops, and then these kind of videos come like a day or two later. Also, make sure to head on down to the comments section below. Like I said earlier, let me know your thoughts on this episode. Please go into full spoilers. I want to discuss things in that regard, and let me know what your favorite moment from the episode was. What did you think of the disclusion, if you will, of certain elements of this episode that probably should have been there, that were featured in the beginning theatrical release? Just let me know all your thoughts on that down in the comment section below. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today. I'll see you guys next time.